Rotoballers, and welcome to week 4 of NFL DFS. I'm here with Frank Ammirante, and I'm your host, Thunder Dan Palio. We're here to talk about week 4 NFL DFS. This is our Rotoballer first look DFS show. Frank, how's it going, man?
How's it going? Excited for another week of football. Disappointed that my Jays just blew the lead against the Yankees. Hopefully they can take the lead again, because if they lose, that's bad, but that's baseball. That's another story. Let's get right into it.
Hey, man, trust me. I love this time of year because we talked about this last week. You got baseball playoffs coming up. You're starting to get into the good part of the NFL schedule. Yeah, I'm a basketball guy. We got NBA starting up. Of course, hockey for all of our hockey guys. It's an awesome time of year. So I don't blame you. If you're checking the scores, man, I won't get upset. It's okay. For those who don't know, we recorded this on Wednesday night. So it's kind of a first look type, YouTube show. And we basically want people we want to give everybody our opinion about the slate and kind of what plays and what games we're targeting in order to help you, start your process and your research process. Obviously, things can change during the week. And by the end of last week, we ended up having a number of players in and out of lineups. And there was a lot of different stuff that happened between Wednesday and Sunday. And obviously that can happen every week in the NFL, but we want to get you started on your process and get you, thinking about who are some of the big targets and the big games that you want to start looking at for your DFS lineups. I just want to take a minute to remind everybody that we have, obviously, at Rotoballer, Rotoballer Premium NFL package still available, a great value as well. We talked about that. Talk about that every week. So if you get a chance, check us out, right? Use promo code ThunderDan, or Frank, what's your promo code?
Oh, my promo code is FRA, F-R-A. You can use that one as well.
Use that if you want to support Frank, all the great work he does for us, not only in football, but during baseball season as well. And so, Frank, we started this new segment. You joined us in week 1, I know, and then it's been me and Joe here since we started a segment where we started to kind of do a week in review. And obviously there was no week in review week 1. So looking back on week 3, I had my worst week of the year. It was bad for me. I took a hard L, as the kids say. How did you fare with your lineups? Just curious.
I did actually pretty good. It was one of my better weeks. I had my best lineup. I know I talked up a Trevor Lawrence stack with the Jags, but I went with a skinny stack there. I went with Lawrence and DJ Chark, which Lawrence didn't really do well, but Chark at least caught a touchdown. But that saved money and allowed me to jam in DK Metcalf, Justin Jefferson. Right. I also had Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I had Eckler on that lineup. I had Tyler Higbee, and I had Mike Williams, who just went off. And also the Bengals defense was really cheap, and they got double-digit points. So that worked out for me. It wasn't anything huge on the win. I probably entered too large of a field, but I still was able to get a nice little win on the week.
Nice, man. You kind of hit on a lot of good spots there. Bengals defense was one thing I did get right. I had no faith in my Steelers last week when I saw that, Deontay was going to be out, and just the way that Big Ben has looked this first 3 games, I was just out on them. So I liked the Bengals D. I played them. I had a few tournament lineups with Stafford and Kupp and Godwin stacked that did okay. So and here's the thing I always tell some of our members is, like, even in a bad DFS week, you can get that money back in bets too. And so I did have some successful bets there where I had, some money on the Bengals, even just on the money line there. I had some money on the Vikings and then some money on the Rams too as dogs. And so, that's my favorite part of betting, honestly, is like you can use your bets to kind of ensure your DFS bankroll. And even in a bad DFS week, if you hit your bets, you break even and you move on to the next week. So
yeah, that's a good point.
So we're going to toss in a favorite bet here at the end of the show as well. We'll get to that as well. All right. So let's move into the next segment. And we usually start with our like cash game plays and high price and low price. But I actually wanted to take a little different approach this week and look at some game totals. We have 5 games here with totals over 50 points. And all of them to some extent are pretty appealing, I think. But I wanted your opinion on which of these games. I'm going to read them off for our listeners and our viewers. Arizona and the Rams coming in, I think, 55.5. Kansas City and Philadelphia. We have Seattle and San Francisco down a few points, down around 52. Cleveland, Minnesota, and then Dallas and Carolina still right above 50. I think it's gone up to like 50.5. Of those 5 games, is there anything that jumps out to you, either positive or maybe there's one there that you think belong with the others? It has too high of a total. What do you think?
Well, I think the totals look pretty set right. There's one that I think I'm going to avoid, and it'll probably be really popular, and that's the Cardinals and Rams. And that's because the Cardinals defense has been better than expected, and Kyler Murray throughout his career, for whatever reason, against this Rams defense, he struggled against them. In his one full game last year, he averaged only 4.4 yards per attempt. The game in 2019, he threw 2 picks. So I prefer to go in another route, and the fact that it's likely to be popular makes the decision easier for me. The one that I like is, there's 2 of them, and one of them is the Cowboys and the Panthers, because I really think the Cowboys passing attack is going to have a big week, just because the Panthers run defense has been phenomenal this year.
Good. Yep.
They're allowing like 2 yards per carry or so to opposing running backs. And in week 1, we saw the Cowboys, face a brick wall of a run defense against the Bucks, and they went with a really pass heavy approach. So I think we could see them do something like that in this game. And then, of course, Michael Gallup's out, so it's easier to jam in Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb. And Amari Cooper is only 6,000, which is pretty nice. $700 less than CeeDee Lamb. So they have some good value there. And Dak Prescott is 6,700 on DraftKings. He's only 300 more than Kirk Cousins. So that's a good value. And that was a good way to segue into the other stack I like, and that's Cleveland and Minnesota.
There you go. Now you're talking.
Because I love me some Odell Beckham in this game. The Vikings pass defense hasn't been great. Beckham put up a 31% target share in his return. He led the team in air yards with 149. The Vikings defense is allowing 10.83 yards per target to wideouts, which is second worst in the NFL. We saw DK Metcalf go off against them, 100 yards and a touchdown, 100 plus. Rondale Moore over 100 yards and a touchdown. Jamar Chase over 100 and a touchdown. So this is a great matchup for Beckham. I really like him here. And he is only 5,800, so it's a solid value.
Yeah, I'm pretty much in lockstep with you there. I think if you go back to that Arizona game, just to start there, that and maybe we can talk about him in the next segment too. But I do think Cooper Kupp deserves consideration for your cash games just based on what he's done. But I do, when I was making my cheat sheet, and I'm not quite done with it yet, but I'm making my cheat sheet for this week, and I'm going through and I'm like, I don't have many guys from this Arizona. I don't have any Arizona guys on there actually from this Arizona Rams game. And I'm thinking that's the highest total on the slate. How do I not have much exposure there? But really, outside of like Higbee or Kupp, I really don't see any guys that I love from that game. And I kind of tend to agree with you that both offenses are probably due for some regression, and it could be a little more of a defensive battle than people anticipate. Of the other two that you mentioned, the one I am in love with is the Vikings-Browns game. And here's why, Frank. I think it sets up really well for both teams and what they want to do. Obviously, we don't know what Dalvin's status is yet, Dalvin Cook, but if he's out again and they end up with Madison and they just decide they're going to throw, it actually kind of is perfect because Cleveland's a pass funnel defense, pretty decent against the run, and a not great secondary. All right, that he could definitely. And Kirk Cousins has been phenomenal this year. Tell me he's not been incredible. So
it's been great.
What's happened? You got
sorry, Bo Bichette just hit a home run to take the lead in the bottom of the eighth, solo shot.
That's awesome. That's the second one of the game, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Wow, they're going nuts. My friend is there too. Sorry to cut you off.
Listen, man, it's fine. It's cool. It's all good. Trust me. I would be checking if I had any dog in the fight, I would be into it too. Well, congrats. Listen, hope they hold it, man. That Jay's pen makes it interesting. So
yeah.
Maybe we'll know by the end of the show.
I want to add something what you're saying about Cousins that I was gonna say, which is pretty crazy. I know it's only 3 games, but Cousins is averaging almost 40 pass attempts per game this year. Yeah. They're finally airing it out, and he's thriving. He's averaging over 300 yards per game. 8 touchdowns, no picks. Like you said, the Browns are a pass funnel defense. And he's efficient. Over almost 74% of his passes he's completed. That's his completion rate. So yeah, I love. I'm totally on board with you here. Love this game.
And so look at the other side. I mean, obviously, let's see what happens with Dalvin, but I'm kind of hoping that Dalvin sits again, and then that kind of, encourages them to throw more, because I want to stack Kirk with Jefferson first and foremost. Thielen is fine, but Jefferson's the guy for me. And then you can bring guys like Conklin into play. You could always go back to the guy that killed me last week, KJ Osborne, if you wanted to get crazy there. But on the other side, though, Cleveland is basically a running football team, right? Who doesn't want to have to throw, but they have a great matchup because Minnesota has been gashed on the ground. We saw Joe Mixon do it to him. We saw, Chris Carson busted off a big run last week and had a pretty good game. When I do my line matchup ratings, I tweeted out this morning, it was the best matchup on the slate in terms of DVOA line rankings. I pit the offensive and defensive lines against each other, and Cleveland's offensive line has a huge advantage here. So, and they have 2 awesome backs. I mean, you want to play Chubb, you want to play Hunt. Either one of them is going to get, have a big one of them. I think is going to have a big day, and of course, OBJ. Man, I was on him last week. He didn't have a huge game, but it's also kind of a slow, boring game anyways. This game I don't think is going to be a slow, boring. No Vikings game this year so far has been, a low scoring game. So I think you can get the running game guys from Cleveland involved. You can get OBJ involved. You can do a Cousins, stack Cousins with some of the receivers and bring back Beckham or Chubb or one of these other guys. And that's one of my favorite spots. I think we're not to give it away too early, but I do love that spot.
Oh yeah, I'm with you there for sure.
Right. Good. We're on the same page. All right. So I like Dallas, Carolina. I think, there's some potential that we see Carolina struggle a little bit without C-Mac, and Dallas defense did look better last week, but I still think they're going to score. I still think that game is going to end up high scoring. So it's a good one too. What about that KC game? What are you doing with Hurts? Because Hurts hurt me a little bit in the showdown the other night, and it has not looked good since that week 1. Do you want to mess around with that game or not?
Yeah, you could. If Hurts showed how he is so much better in fantasy than in real life. Like, he did not have a good game, and he still put up over 20 fantasy points. Right. We could see another situation in this one where they are playing in garbage time, and Hurts just pads his stats. Yeah. But what we could also see maybe as risk here is, they caught a lot of flack of not running the ball. Like, Miles Sanders had 2 carries. What if, maybe the Eagles try to play slower and keep Mahomes off the field and maybe feature Sanders a little more? Because only 2 carries, that's crazy.
He was 2 carries for like 27 yards. He busted. Yeah. And he had 3 catches for like 27 yards. I don't understand their play calling in the slightest. They have other back Gainwell who's solid, and they had a pretty decent offensive line, and they did not attack Dallas on the ground. It was really puzzling. So I think you're right. They would be wise to, with the way that Kansas City's getting gashed on the ground, to do that. I just don't know if I have any faith in their coordinator actually, or I think they panicked. Like, they got down early, right? And they felt they were trailing, and they just kind of gave up on the run game, which was not smart in my opinion. All right. Well, that's a good start to things. I like kind of warming up that way. This next part, we talk about, a high price player who we want to play in our cash game lineup or that you want to be over the field on in GPPs. Who are you looking at? It could be someone from these games we talked about already. Maybe there's someone that's off the radar here too that you're looking at.
Well, I won't really go after him in tournaments just because I want to make my stack, and then I'll let's say stack Dak with Cooper, and then I'll add in Jefferson and Beckham, like getting a piece of each of those games I really like. But if I was playing cash, I do like Devontae Adams. Yeah. He's just under 8,000 on DraftKings, 7.9. Pittsburgh ranks 23rd in pass DVOA. So they haven't been necessarily as stout as we think of them on paper in that sense. And Adams, he's put up 100 yards in consecutive games. He now has a almost 38% target share on the year. I know that's inflated by last game where he got, I think, 18 targets, but it just shows you how he has that really high upside and high floor just because of his sheer volume.
No doubt. I'm with you there. I have him his stats right next to Cups, and it's like a pretty identical other than Cups been in the end zone a few more times and has a higher red zone target share. But other than that, I think they're literally like both catching 8 balls and 11 targets a game. And Adams' matchup is better. You got to think about the fact that the Steelers are again a pass funnel. They're pretty good against the run. And the Packers we've seen in the past and I know last year you were on this all the time, when the Packers see pass funnel defenses, they're not just gonna run and run into it. They're happy to let Rodgers go at it. And so I think it's a real good spot for the Packers this week. And if you wanted to run a Rodgers Adams stack or just play Adams and cash for sure.
Yeah, and that could be a bit contrarian because people will just see the Steelers and shy away from Aaron Rodgers. So
yeah,
that could be interesting.
You're right. I don't know if it'll be a real popular cash play. I think you're more likely to see Cup popular in cash, or Jefferson, who I have those guys both right up there with him. But I think it's a good target. We had one of our guys in Slack today, a really respected member of the group, say, all right, I'm starting. He posted I got Adams in first player. What do I do next? And everyone was kind of like, yep, that makes sense. It's a good spot for Devontae. What about a value, guys? So if we're spending 8K, almost 8K on Adams, is there someone I would say under 5 if you could?
I dug deep for this one.
It's not
he's getting some buzz because on the Titans, AJ Brown's expected to be out and Julio Jones might even miss this game. So I'm looking at that receiver, Nick Westbrook. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right. Ekine or Ekine.
Yeah.
He's only 3,200. I believe he led the team in routes last week. He caught 4 passes for 53 yards and a touchdown. They play the Jets. Nothing to be scared of there.
No, not so.
It's just he'll be thrust into opportunity. It's risk. I wouldn't play in a tournament because the Titans can just go run heavy in this situation. But
sure,
he's only 3,200. It's a punt play in cash. I'd be okay with it, but only if Julio and Brown sit out.
Yeah, you'd have to have both those guys sit, and still be a little dicey. But I think you hit something there, and we have to keep an eye. That's one of those things we have to keep an eye on as the week goes here, since we're so, anymore. These guys just don't practice. They don't, and it's Thursday and it's Friday, and you're like, are you gonna get one practice in before the weekend? So I feel a somewhat decent about starting you in my lineup or putting you in there. I have a couple guys circled here, and they're right on that 5K fringe kind of pricing, but I'm going to run a few guys past you. First of all, I know you're not a fan, and I'm not even a fan either, but we got Zach Moss at 5,300 against Houston, and they've been featuring him the last 2 weeks, and he's getting in the end zone. I know we have a whole bunch of Zach Moss haters on the staff, and I'm not a huge fan of his body of work, but it's really just a volume and matchup kind of thing. Would you think he's cash viable?
Yeah, you definitely could, because the Bills are 17-point favorites. Moss has seen an increased role recently.
Yeah,
you got to think
even if goal line carries,
Yeah, and I think Houston can cover maybe on the back door, because just 17 points is too much.
Oh, sure.
And they've been a bit scrappy this year. Even I know they don't have Tyrod Taylor, but still. But yeah, Moss should get more work than usual. This is such a positive game script. I'm definitely okay with that move.
Yeah. All right. Well, here's a little dicier one. So we got for 4,900, we have Cordarrelle Patterson, who won't go away and is really eating into, I saw a tweet the other day that is, he keeps eating into the snap count and the east of Mike Davis, and keeps, increasing his touches, and it's really cutting into Davis. And we talked about him on the show last week. He's good. It makes sense for Atlanta to get him the ball on reverses or sweeps or on screenplays, because he's one of their best playmakers outside of Ridley. So, I mean, the guy's averaging 16 DK points a game It's been 3 games now. Like for 5K, like is he a guy we can? It's PPR scoring on DraftKings. If he's going to catch 5 or 6 balls, and he's even running back and wide receiver eligible on FanDuel, which is something I didn't even know they were doing. You can play him in either slot.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a great call, especially in full PPR on DraftKings. 7 targets in each of his last 2 games.
Right.
That's what we want as a pump play at running back. And, Washington's defense has been probably the biggest disappointment in the NFL.
Huge.
They've been
Horrible.
Yeah, like you invest all that draft capital in the defense and it looks this mediocre. I mean, that's ridiculous. You got to think they improve a bit, but even if they do, let's say in this game and they start to get to Matt Ryan, that works out well for your Patterson play because he'll just check it down and dump it off to Patterson. So yeah, I like that one a lot. He's only 4,900. I want to add one just because I dug super deep. I'll go a little more at a higher price, and that's Jalen Waddle. He's 4,900. Look at that, 13 targets last week. He caught 12 of them. People when they saw him coming out of the draft might have think this is a speedster. He's going to get targeted downfield all the time, but he's getting targeted in the underneath game, which is great for full PPR. I think his average depth of target is pretty low. I'm just going to pull it. It's definitely lowest on the Dolphins, and it's like one of the lowest in the league. It's 4.6 average depth of target. That's really, really low. So he can rack up.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I don't want to interrupt you.
Oh, that's okay. He can rack up those underneath catches. So especially with Brissett checking it down.
Yeah, that's the thing is Brissett in there. I know both he and Gesicki both had like really weird lines last week where it was like a bunch of catches for not many yards, like 10 or 12 catches each and like 60 or 70, 80 yards. Like they were just getting all these 5 and 10-yard catches. So that bodes well for both of those guys, really, with Brissett in there, just throwing those short passes. Okay. So, all right, I'm going to leave my other guy for later. We'll come back to him since we're going to talk about some tournament stuff, but good stuff. All right. I want to move on here to our next segment. We have kind of not always talked a lot about fades, but I think talking about fades here is important. And I'll admit that last week I took a stance on fading Saquon Barkley, and I ended up fading Edwards-Helaire too, which at both of those ended up being bad ideas. And Joe and I talked about it on the show, and I said I thought they were going to be chalky and that they would bust, and neither of them did. So fading can be really dangerous too. So is there anyone that this early in the week you're considering fading just because it's a bad matchup, or you think they are trending towards being popular and chalky and you just don't want any part of it?
Well, before I say that, I want to say that I made the mistake of not tinkering with my lineup and throwing in Alexander Madison at the end when we knew that Cook was out, because then imagine if I did that on the Lawrence lineup. I would have saved some money and then probably gotten off Lawrence, and then it could have been a huge lineup. But anyways, for this week, looking at it, Josh Allen at 8,000. It's just because the Bills are 17-point favorites. That's a hefty price. I know they'll have to score first to gain that lead, but like if they get an early lead, they can just take their foot off the gas and maybe won't have the volume you want. And there's some cheaper quarterbacks you can get really save money on. Like I said, Prescott only 6.7, Cousins 6.4. And yeah, it just pushes me off Allen because of his price point.
That's fair. I think that's one of those things where I'll in my write-up mention that he's really a GPP kind of only play. If you want to play him, I wouldn't play him like naked and cash or anything. I would play him stacked with Sanders or Diggs or like a couple receivers and just hope that, like last week, that the other team can hang around or come back, or that the Bills just go nuts like they did against Washington and just light up the whole slate. So I think what we saw them do last week, they're perfectly capable of doing against another bad defense. But it's also very possible that they, like you said, that they just kind of roll early and run Singletary and Moss and sit on it too. So I'm with you there. I would consider that. I don't know if I have a specific guy that I want to fade yet, but there's a couple games that when I was going through my games and I was looking at different guys that I want to target and write up, I couldn't find really anyone in the Giants Saints game. That's another game that I got a real
Oh
weird
yeah.
feel for, and I was just like, it's not a big total. Neither matchup is great. Like what Saints team is going to show up, right? We've seen them go
Very,
gangbusters,
very.
and then I don't. And the Giants totally underwhelmed in a great spot last week, and so there was two games that I already kind of circled, and I was like, I'm not going to force anyone in from these games. I don't think. Is there a game
Yeah.
like that for you, or either of those spots?
Another game like that. I agree with you first off that the Giants game is gross. Like the Saints fantasy offense is not appealing to me at all. Um, Another one that maybe Baltimore, Denver is one to
Yeah,
avoid just because they both play at really slow paces. And,
right.
if Denver's been in all these positive game scripts, which has allowed them to play, to run more plays. But sorry, the Jays just won.
Nice.
uh,
All right, now turn it off.
yeah, no, there was a runner on second, two out, and then it was kind of intense.
I saw
Okay.
you looking side eyeing over there. All right.
All right, so the Broncos played at such the slowest pace, and the Ravens played a slow pace too. So if the Ravens are successful, running the ball and controlling the clock, the Broncos will have less plays to run, and there might not be enough volume there, especially on the other side with the Ravens. If the Broncos get it going, then, like, it'll be tough for Jackson to get there. He's at 7,500. That's expensive.
Yeah.
So I'm avoiding. Let's focus on the Ravens here just because they're more expensive. I'm avoiding them in this spot.
I agree. And Denver's defense has been playing great. And the
Oh
Ravens
yeah.
laid a total egg last week in a great spot against Detroit. Probably left a lot of bad. And for me, I had exposure to Jackson and Andrews and Hollywood and even some Tyson, and who totally they didn't even
Oh
consider
yeah.
at all. So I'm with you there. I'm pretty much off that game as well. But yeah, we'll have to see how things go this week. There's not a big name that I want to fade just yet, but I was gonna say Derrick Henry, but I don't feel good about feeling Derrick. If they end up being out with those two wide receivers out, I definitely don't feel good about a Derrick Henry fade, because that could be one of those games where they just give him the ball 30 times and throw it to him even out of the backfield, and it's just a Derrick Henry game. So I don't know if that I want to totally fade him just yet. All right, Frank, good stuff. Let's keep things moving here, and this is where things change up a little bit here. We're going to go into we talked about tight ends last week, and Joe and I talked about, hey, there's all these great tight ends on the slate, and we kind of made a case for all these guys besides Travis Kelce, and then Travis Kelce came out and had another great game, and a bunch of our guys we like Hawkinson and Pitts, didn't do anything despite being in good spots and showing positive trends and targets. So I'm looking at tight end this week, and I'm like, oh, it's kind of one of those weeks where you're like, you don't get it. There's no one that jumps off the page except you have Travis Kelce against Philadelphia, who just got hammered by tight ends Monday night. Schultz had a good game. The other guy, I always forget, Jarwin had some catches,
yeah.
and they just tore him up over the middle of the field. So now I'm thinking, like, are we at the point where I think Joe called it, there's a point in the season where you get to like Travis Kelce, you just click him in, especially in cash, and you're just like, I'm taking my 20 points and I'm going to let everyone else try to figure out which of these other guys going to do anything, because it's a crapshoot. Is there anybody that you can talk me into that's not Travis Kelce at tight end? Because I don't know.
Yeah, it's really tough. He's just a machine, just so consistent. And like you said, the Eagles just got killed by Dalton Schultz. There's a couple I would look at in tournaments. Like, people might have soured on Kyle Pitts. He's still playing a lot of snaps. He's still super talented. Washington's a mess, so that could be viable at 5,000. Tyler Higbee's playing almost all the snaps in LA, and Stafford's balling out, and he's at 4,600. Noah Fant, I know I said the play volume could go down, but he's so cheap, 4,300. There's Mike Gesicki too. Like, I looked it up. Jacoby Brissett, when he was in Indy last starting, Eric Ebron and Jack Doyle combined for like a 30% target share. So he loves throwing his tight end, and he targeted Gesicki 12 times last game. So that bodes well. And if you want to go super deep, this is just a shot in the dark, and it's just Evan Ingram. Even though it's a bad game there, it's just that Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton both suffered hamstring injuries. What if they're out? And then
Yeah.
He's so cheap. We've seen him get targeted a lot in the past, especially with this scheme with Jason Garrett. So he's worth a look at that super cheap price as well.
I like that call. Yeah, that's pretty good. I when you go back to that Pitts, when you're talking about Pitts, what about on the other side, like Logan Thomas? I'm not some huge Logan Thomas truther, but I do know that he's been relatively consistent. I think he's getting 6, 7 targets a game, and he's a guy. Atlanta's defense is not that good. He's someone that I had kind of circled there as a potential cheaper play.
Yeah, that's another good one. I believe he's among the leaders of tight ends in routes run. He's always on the field. He's one of let's see his target share. I think it's like 17. Yeah, it's like 15.
His red zone target share is 37.5. If you want to,
yeah, that's great too. Oh, I wanted to add one thing about Ingram that I just noticed. Like his first game, he got 6 targets, so that was a 17% target share. I think I'm talking myself more and more to Ingram here.
Yeah, well, and that's if those guys are out, I'll definitely take a harder look there. I had Conklin circle only because he went nuts. But, I think that depends too on what we see with his Cook back and maybe that was a little fluky of a good line, but like he's certainly a good player and that's a game we like. So I have Conklin as a potential guy there too. All right, but at the end of the day, let's not get anything wrong. We were talking about Travis Kelce and the number 2 pass DVO offense against the Eagles team that just hasn't really. I know they looked good week 1, but like we've seen Atlanta's offense is not good. In the last 2 weeks, their defense has not looked good. I think Kansas City going to put up some points for sure. All right, so we're on to kind of more GPP. We talked through cash games and cash plays. I want to focus on some GPP guys here. I have a couple guys that I know you're going to like, but I want to go with you first and see if you have a couple GPP type plays or pivots at a certain price off of a chalkier play, or just a guy that you think will go under-owned on the slate.
Well, one of them, I'll go back to the well. He burned me on the showdown last week. I played Robbie Anderson. He's not getting targeted much at all, but he's still running deep routes. He's got a 17.7 average depth of target, 24% air yard share. So he's really running those deep routes. Maybe he gets loose deep against Dallas. Maybe Trayvon Diggs slows down DJ Moore, who could be popular. I mean, he's still sub 7,000 as a price point. Be
popular.
Yeah. So you can pivot to Anderson. He's only 5,100. It's very risky, obviously. And plus, probably Terrace Marshall will be more popular than Anderson as well because he's 4,000. He's over 1,000 cheaper.
And so, everybody, we weren't the only guys that got burned by Anderson Monday night. I saw a lot of people on Twitter end up getting, hey, it's a Robbie Anderson night. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And then so recency bias will be full effect, and we know that Robbie can have big games. So I'm okay with that.
Yeah. So that's for wide receiver.
Let's see if you have a running back. I want to see if you say the guy I think you're going to say.
Oh, running back Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, I knew.
Yeah, because the Dolphins' run defense, if you look at how they perform, like week 1, Damian Harris went for over 100 yards. Week 2, Devin Singletary, I believe he averaged over 6 yards per carry. Week 3, they went up against the Raiders and they got gashed by Peyton Barber. Yeah, so this is a team struggling on the ground. Marlon Mack was inactive last week, healthy scratch, and now they're trying to trade him. And, Indy keep losing. They got to understand that they have to feed their best player. So why not do that against a team struggling in run defense and feed Jonathan Taylor here? 6,300, great price. Yeah. He was a limited participant in practice today, but he should be okay to go. So that's one that I really like. Good. I have another back I want to talk about later, but I think he'll be more popular than Taylor. And plus, like you said, the recency bias with Taylor. Sure. Like he's really not done much, so it's a nice play. And even we talked about Miles Sanders. That's more recency bias where he was barely used. And we talked about maybe the Eagles getting him a bit involved. And he's 100 more than Taylor. So
there you go. Okay. So I'll go we're talking about running backs. I want to go maybe I don't want to steal your thunder for later, but I know you like this guy because you tweet about him a lot, but DeAndre Swift to me is a great play. Chicago, I did the math on the Chicago's defense has not been great. And when you're looking at stats wise, 17th against the run, DVOA. The line matchup bodes well, favors the line's offensive line, even because Chicago's defensive line has not been that great. Seventh most points allowed to running backs. And, we're seeing Swift's role grow as he's getting healthier. Last week, even more catches. And then, of course, what I really thought was big was when they were down on the 1 yard line and they fed him on the goal line. And that to me was like, hey, this is our guy. Jamal Williams is going to be there and not going anywhere, but I feel like, DeAndre Swift, especially on DraftKings at 6,200, right? PPR scoring, he's averaging 20 DK points a game. And that's not even with week one being him being kind of, half involved in terms of what we thought we were going to get from him. So how do you feel about Swift here? I think people just see Chicago and they think they're good defensively, but they haven't been that good.
Yeah, I like that call a lot. He's had 11, 5, and 7 targets so far this year. He's makes such a huge impact in the passing game. And we got that report today from The Athletic where Dan Campbell said he wants to feed Swift even more now that he's fully healthy, like you mentioned. So the fact that this is full PPR and he's one of the best receiving backs. And, like you said, I loved him coming into the year because of this. And now we're seeing it come to fruition. And the Bears are like the Steelers a bit, and the Steelers with pass defense, the Bears with run defense. Like it's more about they just see what's on paper and they might avoid it. So that's a good play too.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you're on board with Swift. I like him a lot. I even toyed with him at that price point in cash just because of the receiving floor and how they really do script him the ball out in space, which is smart. And I think I saw a stat that said he was their leader in target share on the whole team. He's out targeting all the receivers and tight ends too. I don't know if that was accurate or not, but I thought I saw that somewhere.
It is. I just pulled it up. He's got a 19.33% target share, more than TJ Hawkinson, who's just almost at 18.
I mean, would you pay 6,200 for the wide receiver one and an offense who also might get some goal line carries and going to get 40, 50 yard rushing? That to me is like, just throw the low total out, throw the kind of the number matchup and say, this is a really good player who's going to get the ball probably 15 to 20 times and is way too cheap for me.
Agreed. Totally.
All right. How about in receiver? We didn't talk about this game much, but it's another one of those games I think we kind of skipped over at the beginning. Seattle and San Francisco, and a guy like Deebo Samuel, or I know Brandon Ayuk is really cheap this week and finally got going last week. Do we have some interest in the San Francisco receivers?
If I'm playing one, I'm playing Brandon Ayuk just because it's contrarian recency bias. He's barely played other than last week. And then last week his snap share increased dramatically.
Okay.
The first 2 weeks it was, I believe, just over 40%. And last week I think it was at 80%. I'm going to pull it up really quick because it seems like he's out of the doghouse and he's finally being used. And last week, 85.7% snaps, 15.79% target share. He's a good player. He didn't just lose his talent.
Right.
So I like that call. I would go with him just because he'll be contrarian. People might move towards Deebo Samuel.
And he's significantly cheaper. I think it's a good almost 2,000 cheaper on DraftKings, 1,800, something like that. So you're getting a guy with a similar ceiling, maybe the lower floor play, but the similar ceiling type play. That's why I would like him in like a GPP format because Deebo is going to have the better floor. But and San Francisco, those guys are part of their running game. Each one of them gets a couple wide receiver end arounds or scripted run plays that they could bust off to. So there's another guy. The last guy, and then we're going to move on to our bets for me. And I want to see what you feel about this. Would be Corey Davis. I was going off on Twitter earlier with you about narratives and revenge narratives and stuff. I don't care about it being Tennessee for any revenge or anything, but he's 5,000 on DraftKings. Yeah. He, is leading the team in target share, 50% red zone target share. Like he's the wide receiver one on a bad team, but Tennessee's secondary is bad too. 22 pass DVOA. Is he a guy that interests you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because for one, yeah, the Titans defense totally underwhelming. The Jets, they've really struggled lately, but they played the Broncos and Patriots and Panthers, all three teams who have performed well defensively. You got to think like they have to show some semblance of improvement, especially in a better matchup here. And like you said, Davis is the clear alpha in this offense. And I believe Elijah Moore missed practice today, which
There you
would
go.
help Davis even more.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's dealing with a concussion. So if he's out, but the thing is, Jamison Crowder's likely back, so that's the one issue.
Yeah, that could eat into it some. You're right.
But I think that'll eat into Braxton Berrios more.
Big time
So
area. Yeah, in the slot, right?
yeah, so Davis is fine, and Davis is at 5,000. Crowder's at 4.6. Davis is 90 times better of a play considering he's only 400 more.
Yeah, I would be with you on that for sure. 100%. All right. So here's our newest addition here. And I know you're a betting guy. We're going to add to the show going forward your favorite bet of the week. It could be honestly anything, a total spread, just a straight up money line. Don't give us some kind of minus 300 play or something, but like something that you feel really good about early in the week here that you maybe think the total's going to move or the spread's going to move as the week goes on. What are you on for that?
Well, for me, what I want to do for this one is I just felt like the spread is way too high. And that's the Saints are favored by 8 against the Giants. I know the Giants are 0-3, but I mean they deserve a little. I've ripped on them throughout the offseason because of the way they've managed their team, but they deserve a bit better. Like they lost to the Falcons by 3, they lost to Washington by 1. So they've played in close games. We've seen how inconsistent the Saints are when they struggled at Carolina, and like their offense hasn't been anything spectacular. It'll be tough for them to cover that 8 points. I don't trust them with that huge spread, and I think the Giants will play a competitive game and keep it close here.
And that the Giants have been competitive this year. It's that, I know they're 0-3, but they've been in the games. And like you said, we haven't really seen that week 1 game against the Packers that looks more and more like a fluke, right? The more you watch these other games, you feel like that was just the Packers just weren't prepared or something, because they have, the Saints won last week, but they just haven't looked all that impressive. So I like that. And I agree. 8 points is a lot in the NFL. You better feel really strongly about a big mismatch to be laying that many points. I'm going to pick an underdog. I like trying to find some real small underdogs, right? Guys who are like plus 100, plus 120, plus 140. Like last week, it was the Bengals, right? They were 3 points on the road, and money line was like plus 140 or 150. That, to me, that's a nice kind of limited risk bet, but nice payout. So my week 4 team here is the Detroit Lions at plus 120 on the road against the Bears, who, let's be honest, looked horrible last week. I mean, I'm not blaming it all on Justin Fields. He did cost me some money, and I know it's not all his fault, but regardless of it's whose fault it is, they looked abysmal, whether it's Nagy or whether it's Fields or whether they're just not the offensive line is horrible. And let's face it, Detroit had Baltimore beat, and really should have won that game. I think they're just two teams that are trending in different directions. I think the Lions aren't all that bad and have a pretty good offense, decent offense. Their defense is obviously not great. And I just think the Bears just are very underwhelming across the board. So I like the Lions to get a win on the road. What do you think? Could happen?
I really like that now that you're saying it. Like, think about it. The Lions showed some fight in week 1, clawing back against the Niners after getting a trailing large early.
They're up on Green Bay week 2.
Week two, they had the lead in the second half. And then week 3, they should have beat Baltimore. And like you said, DeAndre Swift is a stud. TJ Hawkinson's really breaking out. Goff at least. Yeah. Cephas. Goff at least can move the chains a bit, and their offensive line is very good. And Matt Nagy needs to relinquish play calling duties. Is it
bad? He's so bad.
He's so bad. And Fields really struggled. I liked him last week. That blew up in my face. Maybe I would think about on one lineup throwing him out there again at 5,200. Not to get into DraftKings too much. Back to DFS, but yeah. I really like that bet. That's a good call, and I'm probably gonna add it. I like that a lot.
All right, add it to your card. As far as Fields goes, he's he's off he's off my list for now. Maybe by Sunday I'll convince myself to go back to it, but he left a bad taste in my mouth. And again, it's not. I was going on it with Twitter with some people, and I'm just like saying I'm not sold on him being elite, but I know he's a really good, talented player, and he's got a great skill set. We haven't seen him do it in a game yet, and whether that's his fault or his coach's fault or the system's fault doesn't matter to me. I'm not investing really much more in him until we see him have some success. Because he struggled in that, even in that, week 2 game when he came in, he played most of the game and still looked bad and did not look comfortable and didn't make the NFL decisions that you expect your quarterback to make. All right, so last segment is bold predictions. You're always good for these. You're a bold prediction. Joe always shies away from them, but I know you're a bold take kind of guy. A bold prediction. Let's make this more towards DFS if we could, not betting, but a stat line or a result, someone that finishes as the top receiver, top running back. I don't know, anything you want, but make it bold.
Okay, so I'm gonna pick something I haven't mentioned yet this week, and I just saw the price, and I'm just all in on this. And it's a player from my team, Antonio Gibson. I think he's going to finish. I didn't write this. I do a bold prediction suite every week. I focus more on Jonathan Taylor, who I also think will go off. But for this, I'm going to add in Antonio Gibson could maybe finish as a top 5 running back this week against the Falcons. They gave up a lot of production to Saquon Barkley last week. Gibson looked amazing on that 73-yard touchdown reception. They got to give him the ball more.
Seriously, they do.
And like they're 1-2 now. They just got blown out. Maybe they start to think like, hey, let's give it to this guy. He's explosive. So, and then he showed it on that with that amazing touchdown. And you look at his price on DraftKings, it's 6,100. That's really cheap.
Wait, yeah.
It's a good matchup. Heineke at quarterback can move the ball, and he keeps offense functioning at a decent level, even if he turns it over sometimes. At least he's good for fantasy. So I really like Gibson here. I think this is the week where he has a spike week in production, over 20 points.
Awesome. That would be great to see. And that play actually goes well with what I'm about to say. And you could maybe use these two in tandem. But my guys on the other side of the ball, I'm looking for Calvin Ridley to finally have a big game in the Atlanta pass game. We've seen Washington get gashed. Again, thinking about like pass funnel, right? We know they're pretty decent against the run. We know Atlanta doesn't have much of a run game. Maybe Matt Ryan is toast or dust or whatever the kids are saying these days. Maybe he sucks. I don't know. I'm not convinced that he totally sucks just yet. But I mean, Calvin Ridley is averaging 14.5 DK points a game and hasn't even had a good game yet, right? That's like been his floor. We know he's going to get a huge amount of targets. We know it's a good matchup. And I think you could kind of look at that game and say people are not going to invest much in Atlanta, Washington, because both teams have been rather underwhelming. But a guy like Gibson and a player like Ridley are two really good players who are in pretty sneaky good spots here. So I think we just talked ourselves into like a little 1v1 stack.
I like that. A Gibson and Ridley, and then I'll make one more Gibson lineup where I put Pitts instead of Ridley.
There you go. Right. And that's, I mean, the Kyle Pitts game is going to happen eventually. I don't know if I'm going to keep guessing every week until that's the thing. Once you're in on a play, you're like, I'm just going to keep playing them. It's going to happen one of these days. I might set out on the Pitts train to see when it happens, but I have been invested in Ridley, and I think I'm going to keep going back to that well until we do see him. So maybe like 100, I'd be happy with 100, 120 yards receiving and a touchdown on 8-10 catches. Like that's a 25-point game.
Yeah, he's only 7,000.
Right. He's right in that same price range with, guys like Justin Jefferson and DJ Moore, who are going to be popular cash plays and people are going to want to stack with their quarterbacks. But I don't think people are loving, hey, I want to make my Matt Ryan lineups this week. And I can't wait to stack Matt Ryan with really, because they're not excited. It's not an exciting team to play in DFS, but there's some potential there. Patterson, right? And Ridley and those guys are definitely worthy of some consideration. Well, Frank, that brings us to the end of the show, man. I'm really glad that you joined me this week.
It's been always a pleasure.
We'll have to have you back here soon. We're kind of moving away from the roundtable format, so just the two of us will have you back here sometime when you get a chance, when your schedule frees up again. But it was great talking to you, and thanks everybody for listening. And make sure that if you are watching on YouTube to leave us a comment, leave us some suggestions. What are some topics you want to cover in the future? What are some of your favorite plays? We wish you all the best of luck in week 4, and have a good one. We'll see you next time.
Take care, everyone.